Hey, everyone. We're back.
We are back.
This is All the Things. This is the show where we put on makeup on Saturday night.
Very little, but a little bit.
And sit in front of cameras so that we can talk to people. And we look forward to talking about your questions. I'm Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom.
And I am Monique Duson. My .com is still pending.
Yes. That's okay. You still have just as much value and are created in the image of God. So,
but a .com might put me a little closer to heaven.
There it is. So this week on the show, since we don't back down from controversy, hey, why don't we talk about abortion?
There we go.
Yeah.
Just kick it right on out of the gate.
That's right. So we're going to talk about the Unplanned movie.
Yeah.
And views in process and transition and all of those things. So we have an interview to play back that we did earlier this week with our friend Laurie Stewart from Women in Apologetics.
Yeah, she's the president.
She is the president. Talking about the Unplanned movie. You've seen it.
I have.
You have some opinions.
I do.
So we'll talk.
If you know me, I have an opinion, at least one.
Yes. Well, firmly held. I can tell you that.
That is true.
And so we're going to talk about Unplanned and got a couple of the things to run by everyone. But we do want to invite you to join in the conversation, to join us in the live chat box there on YouTube. My daughter is monitoring the chat, so keep it clean. If you don't, she'll throw you out.
Just like that.
Yes. So post your question there on God, the Bible, or real life. Hey, Abby, wave to everyone so everyone knows what you're doing. There she is at her desk.
And I'd like to introduce, we have a brand new camera here, and we're going to go right to it in 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Oh, wow. Up close and personal.
There you are.
Just like that.
Very cool. All right.
So if I have anything important to say, I'll just jump in there. So,
or you could just jump in with your jokes.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, before we get started, wanted to tell our friend Juad that... Go ahead.
Yes,
you
go
take
ahead.
it away.
All right. Next week, we haven't forgotten about you. A few weeks ago, he had a great question, and I think it's appropriate for Easter since Easter is coming, talking about the sacrifice of Jesus and how is the idea of Jesus kind of being a human sacrifice, if you will, compatible with the Christian worldview. So I finally got someone booked. We have a very special guest coming on, and he'll be on the live stream next week. So we will be focusing on Easter themes, and that will be one of our questions out of the gate. So we want to let Juad know that we haven't forgotten about you, and we're just taking extra steps to really make sure that we give your question careful attention.
Due diligence.
Yes, due diligence.
Yeah.
So let's talk about abortion. Let's do a little bit
right
of a setup here. Yeah. So it's been in the news a lot. There's been a lot of conversations about states kind of revisiting abortion laws, late-term abortions, very timely. And then out comes this movie Unplanned.
Kind of like snuck up on me. I didn't even know it was out. I'm like, oh, okay. So there it is.
Yeah. So it's we're going to talk about it with Laurie, but you've seen it. So we're going to save your comments and commentary until after we watch the playback.
Awesome.
With Laurie. But we do want to let everyone know that they can go ahead and jump in the chat box, and we'll talk more about it and process it all together.
Perfect.
When we come back from the interview. So we're going to play this interview with Laurie Stewart right now. And she's a former pro-choice feminist. She's an attorney, and she does some law even related to religious freedom. And her husband are both involved in the preserving laws for religious freedom and freedom of expression. So she's got some good things to say. So we're going to check this out. We recorded this earlier this week with our friend Laurie Stewart from Women in Apologetics. Let's roll the tape. Okay, so here we are on tape, but we are going to be joined by our friend Laurie Stewart, who is the president of Women in Apologetics. She's also an attorney and
a pretty swell lady.
Pretty swell. Yes. I like that word. Yes. And also, I think I can use this term, Laurie. You used to be a pro-choice feminist. Would that be okay? Would that be appropriate?
Definitely. Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. And we're going to talk about the movie Unplanned, which is getting a lot of press right now. As of this recording, I just checked Box Office Mojo. It's made $13 million so far, which is pretty decent for kind of a lower budget Christian-ish film. This conversation will include spoilers. So if people don't want to know anything about the film, now's the time to hit the mute button or the fast forward button, because we will be talking about spoilers. But Laurie, maybe you can, for those people who haven't yet seen the film, just give us a little synopsis of what the film is about.
Sure. This is a true story. It's about Abby Johnson, who was the youngest Planned Parenthood abortion clinic director. And she also was Employee of the Year and had a moment at her job where I think that she describes it in the movie as about 10 minutes that changed her life. And she goes from being pro-choice to pro-life very quickly and makes a radical change and leaves Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood come after her. So, but it has a good ending.
Biopic would maybe be the genre, and but it is a true story of.
Yes, it's based on Abby Johnson's book called Unplanned.
Very good. Mm-hmm. So the idea of, I'm imagining kind of a play on words of an unplanned pregnancy, but also Planned Parenthood being a critical part of the story.
Yes, and I think the unplanned moment where she has an awakening. I think it probably refers to all of those things.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, in your journey as a feminist, tell us a little bit about your stand. You were pro-choice in the past in your life, and I'm just curious, could you identify with aspects of Abby Johnson's journey? Absolutely.
In the movie, Abby Johnson she grows up in a Christian home, and she's part of a church. Her parents are solid believers. Her husband's a Christian. And when she gets involved with Planned Parenthood, first as a volunteer, escorting patients from their car to the clinic to try to shelter them from the protesters, her family was not very supportive. And so they were always challenging her on how can you be participating in this when life matters. But I can understand, because I grew up in a Christian home as well and considered myself a Christian from the time I was 8 years old. But I wasn't really walking with the Lord, I think, from the time I was a teenager and through my college years. Definitely was not walking with the Lord. And I still remember about the time of Roe versus Wade coming out in 1973, that decision. I remember being very influenced by a movie I watched on TV showing back alley abortions and being so afraid that any woman would ever have to endure a back alley abortion. I became pro-choice, probably at the tender age of 8 or 9, just when I saw that movie, because it scared the bejeebies out of me.
So when you came to faith, you went on your own journey out of being pro-choice. In this movie, there was sort of a critical moment where that happened for Abby Johnson. Maybe you can just kind of describe that a little bit.
Sure, and this is the spoiler alert, but if you watch the trailer, you will get an idea what this film is about. And quite honestly, I think even if you know what this movie is about, even all the spoilers, I don't think it's going to take away from the impact of the movie. It's a very, very well-made movie, well-written, well-directed, well-acted. I just think it was a brilliant movie. You know, I come from a film and theater background. I don't know if you remember that, Krista. My bachelor's degree is in theater arts, and so I actually dabbled a little bit in film and television commercials. So, I mean, I can say just in terms of a film, this has incredible value. It was very well done. Okay, so the 10 minutes. Well, Abby Johnson is a clinic director, so she doesn't really perform abortion. She just runs a clinic, but she is asked to come and assist in an abortion, and it is an ultrasound guided abortion. And in the process of her holding the ultrasound and trying to keep her eyes on the ultrasound so that the doctor who needs the ultrasound to guide him to do the abortion procedure, she becomes fixated on the image on the ultrasound. And she actually sees the fetus squirming and moving and fighting, like to get away from the vacuum tube that has been inserted in her to remove the very life from this woman's body. And as she cannot move, she's just glued to the screen. And as soon as, and it's pretty graphic, there's a lot of blood and tissue. You actually do see the fetus being sucked into the vacuum. I mean, like right before your eyes through the ultrasound. And then of course you have other images of blood and tissue going through the tubes and then into kind of a, lack of a better word, like a toxic contamination barrel. So it's very disturbing, as it's meant to be. So I think if you're not disturbed from those images, you have to ask yourself why. And she runs out of the room, runs to the bathroom, crying, as like she has had an awakening moment. And I think what Abby says in her story is she always bought the lie that the fetus doesn't feel any pain. And that's what she used to counsel women who are considering abortions, is the fetus doesn't feel anything. So there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to fear. And when she saw the embryo fighting and moving, like squirming as if it was trying to get away from the pain of this vacuum, she said she realized it was a person. It now moved over into the realm of humanity.
I think powerful. That it is powerful. Yeah. And I think that it's interesting. This movie comes along at kind of this cultural moment that we're having where the discussion is being re-engaged about abortion and late-term abortions. There's even been some conversation in the media about even what I would qualify as being infanticide, where babies can be terminated even after they're out of the birth canal, which is hard for me to even relate to. But one review I read is that pivotal moment that you just described in the movie is almost like Uncle Tom's Cabin for slavery. This movie is changing the conversation. People are going and it has the potential to change minds. Mm-hmm. Thinking back to your pro-choice days, what do you think you would have thought about this movie?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I probably would have found it disturbing. When I was pro-choice, my position was I didn't think abortion was right, but I didn't want to legislate morality for everybody else. That was really my position. So even though I was, quote, pro-choice, I personally wasn't in favor of abortion, but I just wasn't in favor of legislating anything to prevent women from getting abortions. And I think that there are other people that are like me that are out there that call themselves pro-choice, and it just is their perspective in terms of legislation, thinking, well, we shouldn't be legislating morality. But, now that I'm a lawyer, Krista, I realize all laws are based on morality. All of them. It's just a question of whose morality are we going to base our laws on. So, even if we have traffic laws, they're based on some sense of right and wrong, or and so there's a basis in morality. And so whether you decide that you think abortion's morally right or morally wrong, the question really is, do we have an ethical obligation to protect innocent life? And that's what this is. Abortion is, and I think what this movie opens our eyes to see is a couple of things. One, abortion is really the taking of an innocent life of another human being. And two, I think you get to see what a powerful, incredible, organized machine the Planned Parenthood has been, although it's not invincible.
Laurie, I resonate with so much of what you're saying in the idea that, I don't necessarily believe abortion is right, but I don't want to put my beliefs off on someone else. Like, that was a view that I held for a very long time. And I think, even wrestled with, what does this look like today? In preparing for, our time now, I've wrestled. I was telling Krista earlier, this has really stirred up some emotion for me. And what I thought I was firm on, I'm now like feeling in my heart, like, oh, here's this topic again. What do you say, or what would you say to someone who would say, but what about my choice? Like, I didn't plan for this. And, I also should have a say in what happens in my body.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things. At first, I think back to my upper division genetics class when I was an undergraduate at Cal State Fullerton. Boy, I wish I could get my hands on that textbook, because even though I wasn't walking with the Lord at that time in my life, I knew enough just from the science that was being taught us about genetics to realize that for a baby to be born is a miracle. Just in terms of science and biology and physiology and genetics, babies should not be born. There's so many things that should go wrong in the womb. So for a baby to be born, with 2 arms and 2 legs and 10 toes and 2 eyes is absolutely a miracle. So number one, I think the science will support that life is a miracle. The turning point for me came, after I surrendered my life to following Christ, and this was back at probably in my mid to late 20s, then I went through a series of just unfortunate events in my own life that led me back to church and back to my knees. And I realized I just made a mess of my life trying to make decisions and reason through things on my own. I really needed the truth of God to be able to see the world. And started radically changing my point of view. And on this issue of abortion, this was one of the hardest things for me to let go of. Because even when I surrendered my life to following God and I read the Bible and believed it was true and was really radically trying to change my life to conform to the truth of Scripture, I still was hanging on to my pro-choice notions. And I would still have discussions with my fellow believers about not legislating morality. And this is what I would say to people who are not really sure, is to keep seeking the truth and be open to letting God show you the truth, because that's where I was. I was open, and I kept saying, Lord, if I'm wrong, I want you to show me that I'm wrong, but you need to show me. Otherwise, I still think I'm, right in my position. And God met me in a very unlikely place to show me that truth when I was not even expecting it. It's a long story, but so I think God will show up. If you seek him, you will find him. And if you're asking for the truth, he will show you the truth. But you have to be willing then to conform your life to the truth. There's a difference between someone who is a real skeptic and what I call a pseudo skeptic. I mean, real skeptics, I think, just don't know, but they're willing to believe. They're willing to believe if they can be persuaded or shown one way or another, whether it's clearing away the intellectual obstacles, whether it's clearing away the emotional doubt, whatever it is, healing the hurt and pain. But there are, just certain things that I think we have to do as Christians to open ourselves up to following the truth. The pseudo-skeptics are not really skeptics. They're just hard-boiled skeptics. They call themselves the skeptics, but they've already made up their mind, and they're not going to change their mind even if you give them the evidence for it. And we see that going all the way back in scriptures, that even when the Pharisees and the Sadducees and many of the Jewish leaders saw the truth of who Jesus was, they refused to believe it. In fact, they wanted to kill him. So we have to be open to seeking the truth and then be willing to conform our lives to that truth.
Good answer. I not good answer, but I think that is a solid and a strong answer. And it makes me think of how I, as a Christian, have shown up for others who have been in this situation. And what that has spoken either in skepticism or in belief, whatever the situation is. And as you were speaking, the question that popped into my mind then was, how do we, or what would you say to the Christian woman who might be in a position of supporting or being in relationship with someone who is considering abortion or who has already had an abortion?
Yeah, those are tough situations. Let me just first say I haven't had an abortion, but for the grace of God, there go I, because I was very sexually active from a young age, and so that I could have been, Abby Johnson, who, by the way, admitted to having a couple of abortions before she actually has her turning point movie that they show in the movie Unplanned. But I have people close to me that have had abortions, and I have been there when they've gone through some of that turmoil. And I think that the thing you want to do is make sure, number one, that you love on people. It is so important that when anyone is feeling afraid and they're wrestling with very difficult decisions, no matter what it is in their life, that number one, we demonstrate love. Because when people are afraid, they will often make poor choices out of their fear. And so I encourage people to just pour out love on those people that find themselves afraid. If they are people of faith, is to reassure them, number one, that God is always with them, no matter what. And if you can help to keep them focused on Christ and what he is doing even in this situation, it might be, quote, unplanned, that there are really no accidents, that our God is a sovereign God, and nothing happens that he hasn't allowed. I'm not going to say he caused it, but there's nothing that happens that he doesn't allow, and he can bring good things from even bad situations. I had a radical turning point even in my pro-life view on this issue once I moved away from being pro-choice, which really is just pro-abortion. When I met Rebecca Kiesling, who is an outspoken advocate for the pro-life movement. She was born, her mom almost aborted her because she was born of rape. Her mother was raped, and her mom ended up giving birth to her. And now she has this powerful ministry. And she talks about no exceptions. She believes we should have no exceptions to our views on abortion, because I used to say, well, what about the health of the mother if her life's in danger, or in the case of rape? And she's like, no, God can bring even beautiful things from those situations if we let him. And there's so many pictures in the scripture about God bringing life from death and beauty from ashes. If we put our trust in God, he can make all things new and all things right and beautiful.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, because two of my questions and in conversations that I have with friends is, well, what about if the mother's life is at risk? What if, the child isn't seen as being viable even after birth? Or what if, the mother is raped? Why does the mother need to keep this baby? Or, nothing good can come from rape. And I think that speaks directly to the possibility that all things are possible, that God really can turn something that is negative and seen as negative into something that is beautiful.
And
That's
I think
right.
for me, the issue of abortion really comes down to one question, and that is the baby a human person? And that, for me, is the critical issue, is if it is a human person, then it has value, dignity, and worth, because it's created in the image of God. And as a human person, we have an obligation as Christians to protect the vulnerable, the innocent. Mm-hmm. And so it's a hard issue. But I think that some of the ways that we haven't shown up well in the past as Christians on this issue, I think we're changing. We're doing better. When people have unplanned pregnancies, now there's churches who support pregnancy resource centers. The church I just visited last weekend in Texas, they were collecting things for their local PRC for a baby shower, and that was their big Easter project as a church. We're doing better at supporting, coming around women, rather than just condemning them.
Yes.
We're doing better, I think, at making our case. And, I think that some people change their mind in a moment, like Abby Johnson. Other people go through changes over time, and it's a combination of experience and reason and research and science, and all of these things come together as they go on their own personal journey. But I definitely want to make sure that we don't leave this segment without saying a word to abortion survivors, the women who have had abortions. And I want to make sure that we have a strong word of grace for them, that I have not walked that journey in my life, but I've known many women who have. And I think that some Christian women would be shocked at how many women are in their women's Bible study that have walked that journey. And if you're a dad who lost a child through abortion, or if you're a mom who aborted, or you're a grandparent, there's resources available. If you just go to your local pregnancy resource center, they have small groups, support groups that can help you work through your grief, help you get to forgiveness, and really help you learn about your identity in Christ, and that there's grace for that. So we want to have a full-orbed pro-life position. We don't want to just argue for the baby. We want to argue for everybody involved. So, and I want to give you a final word here, Laurie.
Oh, well, I just want to say that life is a gift from God. There is one ultimate life giver, and that's God, because he breathed the first life into humankind. When he created Adam and Eve, he breathed his life into us. And so he was the ultimate first life giver, and he has now made us to be life givers. When men and women come together, we create babies and we make new life. So even though a woman is carrying a child in her body, instead of thinking this as, well, she has the right to determine whatever she wants to do with that child she's carrying, to think, wow, I have been blessed to be carrying new life that the creator, the ultimate life giver of this universe, has deemed me worthy to carry another child. So I think we can radically change the way that we look at children. I think that we have to look at the way we look at children, the way we look at babies, the way we look at pregnant mothers as being very valuable in our society, even working mothers as being very valuable to our society. There's so many dynamics that go into kind of the shame that we have had in our culture for the last, I'll say, 40 years, ever since Roe versus Wade came out, where we just push pregnant women into kind of this shameful corner, whether you're married or unmarried, whether it's wanted or unwanted. And we can do a lot better at being able to value the creation of life. And remember, ultimately, that it's all a gift from God, and that every life really is a miracle from him.
Very good. And I want to let people know about Women in Apologetics. Once again, our guest is Laurie Stewart. She's the president of Women in Apologetics, and we want to encourage everyone to go get connected there, check out the resources, and all of my friends and extended acquaintances who are there on the website, really just women who are working in the realm of apologetics in various ways. So thank you, Laurie.
Well, thank you, Krista and Monique. It's been great spending time with you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
And we're back live. We want to thank our friend Laurie Stewart for talking to us. And now, Monique, you've seen the film.
I've seen the film.
Since that interview.
Yes, I went yesterday and I saw it. And I sat there for the whole hour and 50 minutes, every minute.
And I have not seen the film because I am highly visually sensitive.
Yeah.
And I just knew, like, I can't do this. It will replay like a tape in my mind for a long time. So I have to be very careful what I see in movies. But you went and you saw it, and I think it'll be good because you kind of have some different thoughts about it than Laurie did. And that's all the things. That's what this show is.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of your thoughts about it.
I think I can start off just saying I thought there was a lot of things added for shock value. And I wondered, like, how many times does this actually happen? Like, is it an actual representation, or was Abby Johnson just pulling out some of the more horrific things that happened in her experience?
That could also be the filmmakers. I mean, as a filmmaker, I can tell you that when you're doing a biopic and you're putting something together, sometimes you do select out, what happens in people's lives. It's not a linear narrative. So that could be her, or it could be the filmmakers.
Okay. And that makes sense. I guess I also then struggled with, like, this thing of, is that an accurate representation of Planned Parenthood? And people who are pro-choice, if they were to see the film, would that make them say, oh, this is why, you can't trust those pro-life people because this doesn't really happen. This is just their depiction of it.
So for you, it was a question of how accurate was the depiction of Planned Parenthood? That was a question that was lingering in your mind as you were watching it. How typical is this in the day-to-day life of a Planned Parenthood clinic?
Yes.
And is this what we call in logic a fallacy of the straw man? Like, did the filmmakers just kind of prop up an image of Planned Parenthood that would be easily knocked down? That we're going to have this visceral reaction to it of, like, that's horrible, and kind of villainizing Planned Parenthood. Your question is how accurate is that?
Exactly. And I'll be honest, I have a lot of friends who have had abortions. And I mean, please don't judge me or my friends, but I have friends who have had abortions, and they've never come out saying, oh, that time when I almost died, or, this waiting room full of people that come into recovery and they just prop you up basically and leave you to linger and either recover or die. It just didn't seem that. I'm like, there's something about this that just doesn't feel right for me in how realistic this may be. And again, like, I'm not a pro Planned Parenthood person. I just was also trying to take a step back and look at things from both sides.
Well, I think from a standpoint of, maybe we could characterize it as a standpoint of defending the faith, of apologetics. Like, one of the things that I think is very important when Christians are out there in public spaces talking about our faith is that we represent people who differ with us in a fair and accurate way. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I try to do, not to say that I'm always successful at it, but in my heart, what I try to do is represent viewpoints that I differ with fairly and accurately, so that if somebody who held that point of view watched my talk back, they would say, I didn't agree with your opinion, but you did represent my group, my religion, my worldview accurately. Like, when my brother watched back my talk on LDS theology, he said that was the best explanation by a historical Protestant that I've ever watched. It was accurate.
Yes.
You represented my religion accurately.
Yes.
And that's what I'm always wanting. That's what I call the golden rule of apologetics. I'm borrowing that term from Bob Passantino back in the late 90s, or early 90s, late 80s. I heard him use that term. And it's basically, we want to represent other people. We want to treat their positions the way we would want our positions to be treated, fairly and accurately.
Yes.
So for you, the question was, is Planned Parenthood being treated fairly and accurately, or is this like a borderline propaganda film?
Yes.
That was a question in your mind. Okay.
That was one of them. The other thing was, I didn't see in the movie and this isn't to like just be a movie critique, but I didn't see what the Christians were doing aside from praying. And I think that that is really important to know, like, it's not just about prayer. Prayer is important, and they have statistics to show that when people pray, you know, rates of abortions go down and things like that. But what else are we doing? Like, how are we surrounding women who are faced with the possibility of abortion?
Or could we say, what are we doing to help support women who are in difficult pregnancies, that where abortion starts looking appealing? It starts looking like a viable alternative. What are we? I think the question you're asking is, how pro-life are we as
what's
Christians?
our responsibility?
Okay.
You know, because I look at that, and then I also look at things like, and I will be completely honest, internet world, hello, this is me being honest. I wonder what our responsibility is, and like in instances of rape, are we morally, I guess we are asking, if a woman were to get pregnant because of rape, for her to walk out, 9 months with a reminder of rape in her body. And I struggle with that. Just being honest, morally, do I think that rape is wrong? I mean, that abortion is wrong? Yes. And I think there's this thing in me that still is, what is the word, juxtapose? Like
it's in conflict.
Yeah, there's a conflict of how do we do this. And especially in my work in social work, I have worked with 12-year-olds, who have been raped and conceived. And so not just how do we, but do we have a responsibility? Does the church have a responsibility then to circle around girls or women who are walking this out? How pro-life do we really want to be? Or is it just okay to have a political position to say abortion is wrong, my hands are now off, and good luck?
I think that's a very provocative point, because sometimes I think the conversation does stop at an ideological position of, well, abortion is murder. But then we're faced as Christians with the practicality of, how do we come around these people who are walking through a difficult pregnancy? Are we doing things to stand for the life of the mother, to stand for the life of the child? What are we doing to help meet their physical needs, their emotional needs, their psychological needs, so that allowing that child to come to term and be born and have a life becomes something that's more appealing than terminating the life. Mm-hmm. So that's a very provocative question. I think one of our viewers asked the question, Linda, she asked, what about, what if you've already made a mistake? In other words, I'm guessing what Linda's talking about is, what if you've already had an abortion? And we shared a little bit of our thoughts about that with Laurie, but I was curious what you thought.
I think that if you have had an abortion, there is grace, there is forgiveness, there is love. I think that any abortion leads and lends to a story that can be shared with someone else, that can offer hope to a woman who may be in that or may have already gone through that. But there's no condemnation in it, like in moving beyond it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm being
clear.
And
I think that the abortion isn't the end of the story.
Yes.
That the thing about what we are saying as Christians is that all of us have made mistakes. Mm-hmm. All of us have made missteps. All of us have had moments of decisions that we look back upon and wish we could have that moment back. Mm-hmm. But God can have a way of redeeming that and bringing wholeness to us. And I think that the most important thing for people to know is that there's grace and that there's forgiveness from the Lord. And we don't want to characterize this conversation frame it up in a way of condemnation.
Yes.
That we are pro-life, but we're not just pro-life for the child, we're also pro-life for the woman, and bringing about wholeness and healing no matter what's happened there. And the Lord has grace that abounds for all of us, because we all need that. I think abortion is so stigmatized, and it quite honestly, it affects more Christian women than we realize.
Yes.
And I think I said that in the interview. You know, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how many women in their small groups
have had abortions.
Yeah. And we have to keep that in our mind when we're in this conversation, to be aware of that, to understand that.
One of the other things you mentioned in the interview was men and how abortion affects men. And I think that's rarely talked about. You know, I know men on both sides of the fence who have, you know, been like, oh no, I don't want my girlfriend to have an abortion. Another guy who's like, I encourage my girlfriend to have an abortion. And just understanding that they also walk a road, and what is that road for them, and how do we circle around them and love them through the heartache and grief of, you know, wanting to see their child come to term and their significant other at the time saying, you know, no. Yeah. Or I know someone who encouraged an abortion and after it happened then regretted it, you know, and the pain and
there's grace for that
comes with that.
Yeah. And there's grace for that too.
Yeah.
So it's a good conversation. My teenager wasn't as enthused about this conversation. I don't know if my husband wants to say anything, but it's a very hard discussion, and we know that it's emotional for some people. There's a lot of taking sides,
thoughts about it,
and so many aspects to the discussion.
Where do you land? And if I talk about this in my church and I say that I am pro-choice, then, you know, what are people gonna say? And you know, if I'm pro-life but only, you know, but like when there's rape, you know, what do you do? I don't really know how to discuss that. And I think Abby, your daughter, is right. Like, this is a heated conversation, and who really wants to go down that road? But I think that it's important for us to go down that road, because if we don't, then what? Then people are just kind of left where they are.
Yeah, that's good. I'm looking at my husband. I don't know if he's going to wait. I can't tell from your body language if you're going to do something there or not. So I'm just eager to use the new camera.
No, sorry, I don't have anything to contribute here.
That's all right.
So
that's okay.
You guys are handling it really well.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, as we kind of wrap up the show, and I do want to encourage everyone to continue to comment if you're watching right now. And I wanted to kind of end out the hour with something a little bit on the lighter side. That is my sister-in-law. A couple of weeks ago, since we were dark last week, I didn't get to do this, but a couple of weeks ago in Dallas, she got selected from the audience. My brother screamed from the orchestra pit to Michael Buble while he was on stage to that my sister-in-law would sing for everyone in Dallas. So in front of 15,000 fans, this happened.
All right, hold on here. I gotta.
It's a melody played at a penny arcade. Would not be like believe if you believe in me.
Very cool moment.
Yeah.
It's a melody played at a penny arcade.
That's all right. I can do it. No, that was very cool. Nikki is, she's a stay-at-home mom, but she loves to sing. And before she had my nephew, she would often do like coffee houses and different kinds of things. So it was just really fun for her to get to sing for Michael Buble. And he even tweeted out a picture of my brother and sister-in-law.
That's cool.
And it was very fun. But it was fun to like blast it. I was trying to, I blasted it on Twitter and was like, hey, you know, she needs to be on The Voice because I just think she's awesome. But it made me think about this is how exciting it was that Nikki was singing for Michael Buble and how awesome of a moment that was for her personally because he's like one of her favorite artists. And also, and I got their permission to share this whole story, but it made me think about the fact that our Heavenly Father knows our name, that we are kind of known by the Father. And it's fun to think about a star knowing our name and knowing who we are and seeing us and for Nikki's talent to be seen for those 2 or 3 minutes of singing in front of Michael Buble. But the reality is that all of us are known by our Heavenly Father, and he sees all of us and he sees all of our creativity and all of our gifts that he has given to us. And it made me think about the verse in Matthew I have here of Matthew chapter 10. It says, Jesus says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. Even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth far more than the sparrows.
Amen.
And I just thought that's such a good thought because I was thinking about a worship song that, you know, our Father knows us. And when we're singing praises to him, he knows all of our names. And that should make us excited every day.
Yes.
Not just because a star knows our name, but that the creator of the universe knows our name. Just kind of a little devotional.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
We'll file that in the back. That's a keeper.
Yeah. So next time you're worshiping and you're speaking to the Lord, to think about the fact that the creator of the universe knows your name. And that should be just as exciting to us as being able to sing, you know, for our favorite star, or that our favorite star would know our name. The creator knows our name. So
yes. And he calls you by name.
And he calls you by name.
Yes.
Very cool. And he calls us his children in
Yes.
Ephesians 1 and Romans 8. And we are adopted as his children. And he knows our names. We're not just nameless, faceless people to him. That he longs to have a relationship with us. And I don't know. Just it's kind of something I've been reflecting on as a result of Nikki's great fame. And hey, if anyone else has a hookup out there for The Voice, let's get Nikki on The Voice.
Yes, we need like NikkiOnTheVoice.com.
That's right.
Yes.
So that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. And we want to thank you for watching, those of you watching live, as well as picking us up on the recording. And we will be back next week with a special Easter edition of All the Things. And it's a tough topic, talking about abortion, but hopefully we did okay with it, and bringing some perspectives and some hope and some healing to some people.
And let us know your thoughts.
Yeah.
We would love to know, you know, your take on it. How did you think we handled it?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Definitely. All right. That's going to do it for us this week. Be sure to get connected with me on social media at theologymom.com, everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. And God willing, we will be back next week with a special conversation about the sacrifice of Jesus. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.